So can I just welcome everybody to the Nestrans meeting, virtual meeting again, and once more ask Mark Masson to do a roll call and give any apologies for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Councillor MacDonald.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Councillor Peter Argyle, I believe, has sent his apologies, and I have Councillor Mollison as substitute. Is he present?
Here.
Vice Chair Dr. Maggie Buchel.
Here.
Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Aitchison, are you in attendance? Okay, I'll skip to the next. Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Cox.
Yep.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
Councillor Hutchison.
Here.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Colin Allenach.
Here.
And Jerry Donald has submitted his apologies as well. Ian Ross, is he in attendance? I believe he's having some issues trying to get into the meeting, but I'll keep an eye on the attendee section and I'll add him to the roll call if he appears. And George Mayer, he's another one who sent his apologies. That concludes the roll call. I'll hand you back now to Councillor MacDonald.
Can I ask if is Councillor Mackenzie on my?
Yes, I did get here from Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Right, so let's get going. Declarations of interest first. Anybody got any declarations to make? If we could go straight on then to minute of the board meeting of the 24th of June. Can I get agreement if there are no questions that that's a correct minute? It's okay. Good stuff. And then on to the board meeting dates for 2021. Just for noting any questions on that at the moment. We don't know where we're all going to be with such things, but if we could note that for just now, that would be preferable. Super, thanks. Right, to budget matters first, and I think we've got Kenny Oxton to take us through 3.1 on the agenda, the 2021 budget matters.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the purpose of this report is to provide an update of the partnership income and expenditure position as at the end of August. This is set out in Appendix 1. Appendix 2 also sets out a list of proposed environments designed to maximise the use of funding due to the impact of COVID on a number of projects. For your note, there's also some new grant funding being awarded from Sustrans. This is a 100% grant of £250,000 for further path improvements for the Deeside Way. So the recommendations are to note the monitoring position as Appendix 1, approve the environments listed in Appendix 2, and to note the additional grant award for Deeside Way improvements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Have I got any questions on that report? Don't see any hands raised.
Councillor Mollison has indicated. Yeah.
Oh yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Councillor Mollison, please go ahead.
Sorry, my mistake about the hands. In Skype, we put a Q or a C in the chat column, so my apologies for that. I'll just change screen. Yep. In Appendix 2, there's mention made under rail the new Abington Road over rail bridge. And note what's mentioned there, that matches what was discussed at Aberdeenshire Council's Kincardine and Mearns Area Committee on the 30th of June. No matching funding could be found at this time. I was just wanting to ask, should a viable funding approach be found in the future? Hopefully Nestrans would look favourably again on the proposal. Would that be the case?
Thanks for that, Councillor Monison. Can I get a response, perhaps from an officer on that one?
Shall I come in, Chair? It's Rob Dixon. Just to say, yes, there's nothing to prevent the Nestrans Board from reconsidering a project in a future year. It would obviously be subject to the board making that decision. So there would be nothing to say you couldn't come back and make that decision to contribute again in the future, as I understand it.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then I've got Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, on that item, I would suggest that we leave that sum in at the moment because we don't know where we're going budgeting further down this line, what the priorities of Aberdeenshire Council are going to be. Certainly, we got notification today that this might be withdrawn, but I would suggest we need to discuss that further. So I'd suggest we defer that to a future meeting rather than take any decision on this matter today. Thank you.
Can I call on somebody from Aberdeenshire to perhaps clarify for me then where we are in Aberdeenshire with this particular item? I can't see all the hands.
The chair, if I may, it's Stephen Archer, Director at Aberdeenshire. My comment would be that whilst I hear Councillor Carr's point that he's putting forward to you as the board, the matter was discussed by Kincardine and Mearns Area Committee. The conclusion was that there was not funding in place at this time, and so at this stage that matter is therefore closed. To reassure Councillor Carr, yeah, we are absolutely exploring what other financial opportunities there might be, and I think it appropriate, if there are some funds that would come forward, that we may then come back to the Nestrans Board and see what funding might be available. But rather you earmark it and lock it away on something that is certainly not certain at this point. I would have thought that you would be deallocating and putting it back into your budgets. You may have alternative uses. Equally, we may, as Aberdeenshire Council, come back and knock on your door should there be funding that comes forward for the Abington Bridge scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Archer. Is that is there anything else you want to add to what you said, Councillor Carr?
Yes, I would disagree at this moment in time. This is for a year's budget, to my knowledge, and the priorities were set. There was good reasons why this money was allocated. Well, we're not just 100% sure yet. There was a lot of confusion at the area committee, I've got to say, about this sum and about the priority. Certainly, it's a priority from the community, and I would suggest that we defer taking any decision today until we get some additional clarity on where the drive to allocate this money came from, and as I say, we're only halfway through the financial year. We've got a new budget being worked up. In fact, possibly two budgets before the end of the financial year. So I would suggest we take no decision today on this until we are sure that there's not going to be additional funds come forward, because it would be a shame to lose this sum, which could see this project go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, do you want to come in on this paper? Is it the same item, or have you got something else to add?
Well, is that the same item as George? It's on the same paper, though. The environment.
If you'd like to ask your question of officers, Councillor Cox.
Yeah, okay, it's the paper. It's in connection with the environment of the A947. The first question is this the first time this has been notified to Aberdeenshire councillors answer to that, please?
Is this the first time this has been noticed to Aberdeenshire councillors? Is that your question, Councillor Cox?
Yes, yes. Then I'll come in with the main question.
Right. This is a Nestrans Board meeting. Mr. Archer, are you able to answer that for Councillor Cox? You're on mute. Mr. Archer.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah, I'm not able to offer a direct response to that, other than Spaces for People has clearly taken a huge resource out that now puts us into September, not far off October. So I think it is reflecting that there just would not be the resource to fully spend what had originally been set as the budget. So it is flagging it from that perspective to say there now just cannot be the time in the remainder of 1920-21 to fully spend the allocation that had been put there. So therefore the proposal would be to hand some back because we're not going to be able to spend it. I think that would be the background, but I'm not aware of how that has been communicated from an Aberdeenshire perspective, and clearly we'll pick that up offline, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you have another question that you wanted on the same matter, Councillor Cox?
Yes, I do. Appreciate the response. Quite concerned as chairman of the A947 working group to read this today rather than it being notified, and I'm slightly confused in terms of the Spaces for People, because reading the report, it indicates that resources have gone to the Spaces for People. I fully understand if it's a deferment, but the way that it's set out, it's a reduction in budget.
Yeah, I could be wrong. My reading was that the resources would be around officer time rather than money, but I'll ask Mr. Archer if he could clarify that for me, for us.
Certainly, Chair. This is, as I understand it, around the physical resources, staff-wise, to be able to take forward these initiatives whilst being drawn down into the Spaces for People activity. So that's where the reflection is. We won't spend it this year. So the proposal is that we would in essence be handing back. And again, as we then look at the detail and look at the schemes going into forward years, there would clearly be that discussion between Aberdeenshire Council and the Nestrans Board about what opportunities there might be. But physically, we're not going to be able to fully spend in the 2020-21 year.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cox, you still got your hand up. Is there something else you wanted to come in on?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, members of the board, you've heard from other members. My view would be to go with the recommendations that we have in front of us. At number 1, note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, and approve Appendix 2, and note the grant funding awarded for the Deeside Way improvements, which I think we would all welcome. I've heard from Councillor Carr that he wishes that no decision has been made. Do we have anybody else who wants to take that amendment as a seconder to Councillor Carr's request? I'm not seeing anybody taking that position, Councillor Carr. So unless, as everyone, that will not be able to go to debate on this one, I'm afraid. So I would ask the board to agree that we go with the recommendations on report 3.1 as they stand.
Councillor Cox has got his hand.
Councillor Cox, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I would support Councillor Carr. It's just, well, I think it would be useful to hold that until we get clarification on these points. So I would support him.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Cox. So we do have an amendment in the name of Councillor Carr. Mark, do you want to take us through anything that we need to do now in order to come to a decision on this report?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wonder whether anybody was want to add to the debate. If not, I can just go straight to a vote.
Okay, can I ask members of the board? Councillor Mollison has his hand. You're on mute, Councillor Mollison. Nice to see you too.
Yes. Good. I can rephrase what I was saying and make it better. A little bit of background for those who are not privileged enough to be in the Kincardine and Mearns Area Committee. This went to a vote at our area committee on the 30th of June. 6 votes to 5 took us to the position that Nestrans is also in today. Councillor Carr was on the side that won 5 votes, so he is consistent with his position at that time, but for him, unfortunately, he was not in the majority. As one who was part of the majority of 6, I support that position, and I would wholeheartedly support the position being taken by the chair, and that we accept the recommendation of officers. It was thoroughly explored at the area committee. There is no prospect of further funding at this moment coming forward, and we've heard from the director that should further funding avenues come to the fore, it can come back to the Nestrans Board for reconsideration. I'm quite content with that. Thank you very much. I'll try and get my buttons correct now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mollison. Have I got anybody else that would like to enter the debate on this? If not, maybe just if you want to.
Yeah, Councillor Carr can sum up, and then yourself, Councillor.
That's what I was about to say. If you'd like to just quickly sum up, Councillor Carr, that would be helpful.
Well, thanks, Chair. Well, I think it's unfortunate this has come forward today without further consideration from councillors and certainly from Aberdeenshire councillors. Rather than being fully discussed. Certainly we're discussing at the area committee, but as Councillor Mollison says, but as I say, we're halfway through the financial year, and there are other avenues being explored at the moment on this matter, and I think there's some merit in deferring this until we are sure that this is that there are no funds going to be able to come forward this financial year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. I would just in summary like to say that I feel that we have, given the amount of information in front of us and heard from officers and also those that were at the committee, I feel comfortable that we do take that money out at the moment. We've heard very clearly from Rab Dixon that it could come back to this board, and we have to take that bigger picture view of what we can do over the course of the year. So I'm comfortable that we go forward with the requirements as we have here, and we'll just go straight to the vote.
Thanks, Chair. The board has before them a motion in the name of the chairperson to approve the recommendation and amendment by Councillor Carr to take no action in relation to the environment of the Aberdeen Bridge. Can you please vote motion or amendment, chairperson?
Motion.
Councillor Mollison.
Motion.
Maggie Bochel.
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison. He was in attendance, but he had a problem with his mic. But if he can maybe tap into the meeting chat, I don't know if he wants to. I'll just give him a few more seconds to do that. Well, he has. He's indicated a motion. Councillor
Okay.
Bell.
Motion.
Councillor Cox.
Amendment.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Motion.
Councillor Hutchison.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Amendments?
Colin Allenach
Motion.
and Ian Ross.
Motion.
The motion is carried by 9 votes to 2.
Thank you very much. Can we now move to 3.2? And if I could ask Anne MacDonald to come in and to go through this report with us on the annual accounts and audit.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, members. Very pleased to have the audited accounts with you today. So I'll turn to my report, which starts on page 69 of your papers. So if I could turn to paragraph 9 of the covering letter, which is over onto the next page. So I just wanted to flag there was one item there that I highlighted when we issued the papers last week that was still in progress, and this was to do with the actuary and the pension liability figure that appears in the accounts. So that's I'm still in discussions with the actuary on that. So I've not yet fully resolved it. But I would still like to proceed today just on the basis that I'm not anticipating that the figures are going to change. So just as a reminder on the background, the pension liability in the accounts, which is in the balance sheet on page 41 of your papers, is a figure of 630,000. So this is a figure that's provided by the actuary as an estimate of what the liability would be for all members of the pension fund in order to clear their pensions in due course. So it's very much just a technical accounting requirement, and it's not a cash requirement. So the only cash impact on the accounts of the pensions is the contributions that are paid by the employer on a monthly basis. So this particular figure that I'm referring to is provided by the actuary, and the issue relates to a case last year called the McLeod judgment, which some of you may remember, which identified that there were discriminatory practices in the transitional arrangements introduced by the pension scheme that came in 2015. So in order to address this, there's changes that need to be made to the scheme. So last year, when the judgment came to light, actuaries estimated what the additional costs would be. So there was an additional figure added into last year's accounts. As we move through into this year, the proposals to rectify the discrimination in the scheme is out for consultation at the moment by the Scottish Public Pensions Agency. So the consultation is very recent, and it's still in play, but it's what we would regard as the best information on which to base the figures. So I'm just seeking clarification with the actuary that they've taken that on board in the figures that they've provided for inclusion in this year's accounts. So I'm fairly certain that they have, but I need that confirmation from them before finally concluding. But as I say, I'm hopeful, touching wood, everything else, that the figures that you have before you will be the final figures. So I would hope to have that. I mean, I'd hope to have it resolved by today. So apologies that I haven't. But I would hope that in the next day or so we'll be able to confirm that. And if I can, through you, Chair, because you'll be putting your name to the accounts in due course, if we can just conclude the matter with yourselves, whichever way it goes. So if there are changes required, then discuss those with yourself. I'm happy to email round the rest of board members if they're content to proceed. But I'm hopeful, as I say, that we'll conclude with the figures that you have in front of you. So moving on to the next page is my proposed audit opinion. So it covers 3 pages, but it is an unqualified opinion. And a reminder that as well as giving an opinion on the accounts, on the figures itself, I'm also giving opinion on the commentary, which are the opening pages within the annual accounts document. We're also required to give an opinion on the governance statement, and also on the remuneration report. So there's 4 documents within the annual accounts booklet, which we are giving unqualified opinions on. Moving on to what I would call my annual audit report, which is on page 75 of your papers. Key messages are on page 78. So that's just confirming there the unqualified opinions. Also just want to flag the point that because of COVID-19, there were extensions to all the deadlines this year for producing audited accounts. So there was actually an extension provided from 30th September, which would be the normal date, through to 30th of November. But I'm pleased to say that the accounts for Nestrans were prepared by the end of June, as would have been the case in normal years. And we've been able to conclude the audit largely for you today. So we'll still be in line with that 30th of September deadline and not requiring to go to the extension. So that's been really great all round. So very much appreciate the efforts by finance that we're able to continue business as normal. Moving on to page 7. Sorry, getting the pages right. 82, I think it is, of your papers. So yes, 83. Apologies. So those are the key issues which we've reported from the audit of the annual accounts this year. So I've already spoken about number 1, to do with the pension liability. Number 2, Civitas funding. Is again, it's an accounting disclosure issue rather than anything impacting on the actual figures held. So when you saw the accounts back in June, you may remember that legislation came in this year which allowed Nestrans to carry a general fund. Hadn't previously been permitted by legislation to do so. So at the end of the year, when there were unspent balances, they had to be effectively reflected as a creditor back to whoever the funder had been, because there wasn't the option to carry a fund. So that changed in March this year. So the accounts include a general fund for the first time. So there was work undertaken in the preparation of the accounts to identify those balances which would correctly should be included in the general fund as unspent balances. So there was one that was omitted, and that's the only adjustment that we made to the accounts. So there was a transfer from the creditors figure down to the general fund figure in the balance sheet. And as I say, that was the only adjustment that we made to the figures in the accounts. Number 3, we comment on what's called going concern. Again, that's a technical requirement. So this is raised here because the net liability position is, as I say, it's net liabilities rather than net assets, and that's as a result of the pension liability I spoke of earlier. So in a normal commercial organisation, there would be concerns round about cash flow when liabilities are greater than assets. But in this case, it's a technical requirement because of that. It's a technical impact as a result of that pension liability. Because, as I say, the only cash impact is the employer contributions that are made by the body to the pension fund each month. Moving over onto the next page, we comment there on, as I say, the commentary and on the annual governance statement and remuneration report. So we made some changes to the governance statement just to reflect the changes that have arisen as a result of COVID. So obviously, with working remotely, with virtual meetings, that's been a significant change on the governance arrangements in all public bodies and in all bodies. So it was important that is reflected in the governance statement for this year's accounts. So although we're commenting on 1920 financial year, the governance statement actually also covers the period up to the day that we sign the accounts. So that's why it's important to consider any significant changes that happen right through from end of March through to September. And in the next two sections of the report, this is in line with our Code of Audit practice. We consider financial sustainability, and we consider the governance arrangements in a bit more detail for the body. So there's a number of areas that we've raised some comments on there, but by and large, we're concluding that we're content with the arrangements that are in place. We think they're appropriate, and there are no matters that we need to draw to the board's attention. So thank you, Chair. That was all I wished to say on that, and happy to take any questions, and happy for you to proceed to, as I say, to approve the accounts if you feel it's appropriate to do so, with the caveat round about the pension liability being concluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald, for that wholesome report on the audit and audited accounts. And can I ask first, are there any members who would like to ask questions or a question? I'm not seeing any hands at the moment. So if we could go back to the recommendations as outlined, there is, of course, the necessity to get the final T crossed or I dotted, as was mentioned at number 1, before they can be signed. And I expect there'll be a process to do that somehow. Normally we would just sit and sign it, but we'll sort that. Are the board content that we move forward on that basis, that I get a update on that one element that we're still waiting to hear from, and then sign the accounts on that basis?
Agreed.
Thank
Agreed.
you. And then we've considered the report, and if we could also agree, board members, that we have this £10 charge for a printed copy to be available. I'm not sure it's taken up terribly often, but if we could agree that as well, that would be, thank you. Agreed?
Agreed.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'll just, if I could just quickly confirm with you that there is an electronic process this year to sign the accounts. So I'll be in touch with you on offline to do that.
That would be splendid. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, members, if we could move on to the strategy section of our agenda and call in Rab Dixon for the director's report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Item 4.1 is the director's report, and members will see that we're very much back towards a normal schedule of meetings, although the big difference, I suppose, is that all of these since the last board meeting have been held remotely, mostly via Teams, but we are now back to a situation where most meetings are happening on a regular basis. A couple that I would like to bring to members' attention, if I may. The Health and Transport Action Plan Steering Group, which met on the 30th of June. There is a minute of that for members' information at Appendix 1. As members will recognise, the whole focus of travel to health appointments has been very much changed, and some of the people who are involved in the HTAP group, including Jerry Donald, who's obviously a board member of Nestrans, have been very involved in the reaction and the response to the COVID crisis. However, again, we're back towards HTAP steering groups and the HTAP subgroups going to be meeting as we move into the autumn period. The second one was the Bus Alliance Board, which met on the 9th of July, and the minute of that meeting is at Appendix 2 for members' information. I'd also like to raise that the regional transport partnerships, the 7 lead officers, have been meeting on a regular basis, approximately monthly actually, and have been meeting with Transport Scotland on a fairly regular basis to consider the impacts of the current crisis that we're in, to think about the transport transition plan that Transport Scotland have implemented, and regional transport partnerships have been being consulted on elements of that as we move through the various phases of recovery from the COVID situation. Nestrans also chaired the most recent meeting of the Regional Transport Partnership Chairs, which Councillor MacDonald chaired. It was supposed to be held in Aberdeen, but obviously it was held virtually. But nevertheless, it was appropriate that it was hosted by and chaired by Nestrans on a regular basis. I also attended the most recent meeting of the Airport Consultative Committee on 4th September. Although Dr. Bochel is Nestrans representative on that group, I attended in her absence. And I think it's worth recognising the challenging time that there is for the airport, how difficult it has been with the number of cancelled flights and airlines and holiday companies withdrawing some routes. We did receive a presentation from Roger Hunt, who's the interim managing director at the airport, and I think it's fair to say that they're looking to a recovery, but very much see that as not a quick return to what was once normal. And they're talking up to 3 to 5 years to get back to the levels of passengers and the level of activity that they had pre-COVID. So I think we must recognise what a challenging time it is for the airport, and I guess for all transport operators in and around the city, the region, and I guess across Scotland and the wider area. I've also listed a number of meetings that are scheduled to take place over the coming months, but happy to take any questions from board members on any of those that we've been involved in or those coming up. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Can I ask members if there is anybody who on any of that wants to ask Rab a question? I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll happy to note that and move on to COVID-19 status update, which is Paul Finch. If you're there, that would be helpful to take us through that agenda item. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for bringing me into the meeting. Members who were present at the last meeting in June will recall that we had a similar paper up then, and we thought it was appropriate just to continue that update to the board on the executive's response to COVID and some of the other broader issues that are arising at the moment. So the report contains just a sort of narrative around some of those changes. It's got a couple of appendices. The first appendices talk through some of the principal travel changes, and then there's a second appendix which highlights the outcomes of our recent travel surveys. But to take you through the report, as we've discussed already, Nestrans continues to work remotely, although we are beginning the process of working through those risk assessments, etc., which might bring some of us back into an office environment, although we are very cognizant of the government's advice and also the patterns of working adopted by our partners in the local authorities as well. Appendix 1 highlights some changes that we've picked up on the travel network, and we can see that certainly on the road network, there is still suppressed demand, but it's very much rising. Certainly, the profile of traffic demand across the day has changed, and there seems to be more of a peak in the middle of the day and towards the end of the day, whereas the morning peak doesn't seem to be as pronounced as it previously has. And some commentators have compared this to more of a Saturday type of traffic profile. And that's important because often it's the peaks that drive the requirement for investment in the transport network. As been alluded to, the public transport demand on the public transport, both rail and bus, is around 30% of what it was previously, so taking a big hit there. However, there has been significant uplift in the walking and cycling activity, particularly walking, I think, and cycling, as we've seen over the summer months. And again, we'll keep a close eye on that as we go through into autumn. Members will recall in June that we reported we were going to be undertaking a series of travel behaviour surveys, trying to capture how people's were changing in this period of time, and we were able to get funding from Spaces for People to do a series of attitude questions to a panel of residents in the North East, split equally between Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. Sorry. Every 4 weeks. We're on to the second of those surveys now, and there's some quite interesting findings coming out of these, and we've appended those findings to the report. Certainly there's a positive sentiment towards walking and cycling, which has been translated into more activity. There's a lack of positive sentiment towards public transport and taxi sharing, probably around the risks of COVID and perhaps the behaviours of others, but there are mitigations that have been suggested that some people were quite happy with if they could be put in place. Continues to be positive sentiment around private car use. And interestingly, the attitudes around returning to commuting, and we can see that people increasingly see a future more in home working and more flexible working. And again, it's important to watch this trend as we continue, because that has impacts on peak demand on the network, also on economic activity in certain locations such as the city centre and Aberdeenshire's town centres. I think there's almost a 14% decrease in willingness or future aspirations to commute, which is quite significant. We think about some of the other activities. Transport Scotland are going to be resuming their work on the Strategic Transport Projects Review, and you may recall that that's almost the list of schemes that Transport Scotland want to be investing in over the next 5 to 10 years. So that process is about to begin, and we understand that the reporting is going to be split into 2 phases, possibly one set of outcomes reported early January 2021 and other aspects being reported later on in that year. Locally as well, there are Nestrans staff continue to support both councils in relation to Spaces for People and the Bus Priority Rapid Deployment Fund, and work on those aspects. And the Kelly and the team continue to be putting out messages around the safe use of the network and the promotion of active travel at this time. So the recommendations are to note the changes to the operation of the Nestrans Executive, note the changing of pictures of demand and services across the transport network, but also note the examples of how the work of Nestrans is adapting to these changes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. And have we got any questions from members at the moment? Do call on that report. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. That's quite an interesting report. Thank you. I'm just trying to really get my head around what the numbers mean for the transport survey on page 113. So quite interesting numbers, but what do they actually mean though? I mean, so by that I mean, what was the sample size? When was the sample taken? And who actually featured in the survey? So
okay.
3 questions.
So the sample size is 308 responses split between Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. They are repeated on a 4-weekly process, on a 4-weekly basis. And the survey, the survey's results that we have in front of you at the moment were taken from a panel between the 10th and the 18th of August. So there's a survey company who selects at random responses from both of the areas, and we ask those the set questions during that period of time to get those results. And they are statistically the results are statistically valid, that are promoted there in terms of the numbers, the base numbers around it. And then over time, when we have more of a series of these questionnaires going out, because there's 10 of them planned, we'll have more confidence in seeing what the trends would be as well.
So may I have a supplemental question,
of course,
Chair? Thank you. So you said 308 people were actually chosen not at random, but presumably, but by a panel. So how do they actually get chosen for that panel? Did they? Was there a, you know, how do they say, oh yeah, I'd like to get chosen for that? I'm just trying to really trying to get a feel for just how valid those numbers are.
They are okay. So a survey company has typically market research companies hold a panel of a representative panel of residents in a particular area, which is far larger than the 150 there, and so that is then representative on age, sex, and I believe it is on their working, non-working relationships. So some of the key factors on the panel as a whole are set to be representative of that area. Then they are, I believe that they're selected at random beyond that wider panel, and make sure that they're able to answer those questions. And then the characteristics of the respondents, because we asked about sex, age, working characteristics, are then checked against the characteristics of the area as a whole. So it is a standard market research approach that the consultants that we're using are taking on this. So it's not a self-select, or would you like to do this? There is a degree of control around it, which seeks to make those responses as reflective as possible to the communities that the questions have been asked to. And then there's also a degree of statistical reweighting if there's any bias within those responses, to make sure, again, we've been as representative as possible.
Thank you. So may I ask another question, please, Chair? Because I'm kind of getting the idea of this now. So the 79% that said walking was actually on the up and up, and they were very pleased to walk. What were they asked the question what they thought of spaces for people, by any chance?
The question was asked. I think, how do you, during this period, how do you feel about these different modes of transport? And the question was around their perceptions of how they felt positivity towards those modes. How comfortable are you? How positive do you feel about this mode of transport at this time? Very, very positive, not at all positive, you know, very worried about it. And I think that's the question that was asked, and that's reported. The results are reported there. We did not specifically go for spaces for people, because spaces for people measures have not been applied across the whole, across the whole of the region. So as again, we're trying to get that snapshot across the whole of the northeast of Scotland, not specifically, say, in Aberdeen City or the villages in northeast.
Okay.
Thanks very much for that, and it will be interesting. I think, this is number 2 out of 10, so it will, I think for me particularly, it will be interesting to see the trends that we get as we go through the easing of lockdown measures, or even God forbid that we have stricter measures in place over the winter or whatever. But I mean, I think trying to gauge people's behaviours and so on is always quite a difficult thing. It was interesting, I think, that the university is doing some work in a broader national sense to have this local survey that Nestrans have commissioned is, I think, very helpful indeed. Colin, Alan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, it was just about the spaces for people as well. I think at the last meeting we discussed that one of the lessons learned from the Union Street closure would be about communication, and really from the last few measures that have been put in place at the beach, and some discussion about what's happening from Hazelhead, and that being put out into the press and onto social media. I don't think that communication and saying why we're doing this and how people are supposed to work with these spaces for people measures has been put out yet. So I don't see that lesson being learned yet. It's a wee bit concerning that the positivity of some of these measures that were put in place is being lost by, frankly, in some places, and for some parts of social media, almost a hysteria at loss of car parking spaces when there's only a few car park spaces lost and things. So I think, you know, I don't know if I'm speaking to the right people here about getting in front of the curve with that. We always seem to be just behind the latest social media rant about these things and into the press. I think there's a good message to be put out there, but I think that message is being lost a bit in what we're doing. Just, you know, plonking bollards around here or there and expecting everybody to get on with it is a bit hard.
Okay, thanks for that, Colin. I'm not sure if there's a response to Colin's concerns about communication and so on, and perhaps it would be something that we can come back to as a board with a fuller report or understanding both in the city and the Shire of the measures that have been alluded to there. They are still going in some places and that they're not fully implemented on the ground, and some have been there for some time already. So perhaps that's something that we can look at as a board in more depth in the future, if that's acceptable to people. I've got Councillor Carr wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, endorse what Colin's saying. I think there is a need for additional work here. You know, to enable the public to evaluate, you know, how effective these measures have been. And I think, you know, we're halfway through the process at the moment, but certainly there's been a lot of press interest in this, as we're all well aware, and in social media. But I think if we're going to retain credibility for the whole process, it does need to be evaluated, and we'll have to have, you know, answers for those who've been raising concerns about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin, did you want to come back in on that? You've still got your hand up. No. Okay.
Sorry, no.
Thank you. Okie doke. Can we then agree the recommendations that are in front of us, members, to note changes to the operation and of the Nestrans executive network and examples of how work Nestrans continues to adapt?
Agreed.
Thank you. I think we're on next to the regional transport strategy. An update, if you wouldn't mind, it's Kirsty Chalmers who's going to take us through that.
Yeah, thank you very much. This report really is just an update on the ongoing consultation on the draft regional transport strategy, which the board approved for consultation along with all its supplementary documents at its meeting in June. So just as a reminder, there's the full draft strategy, the at a glance document, and then we have the strategic transport appraisal, strategic environmental assessment, and equalities impact assessment, and Fair Scotland duty reports are all is the package of documents that are currently out for consultation. The consultation was formally launched on the 5th of August and will run for a period of 10 weeks, so closing on the Friday the 16th of October, so around halfway through that period just now. There's an emphasis on virtual engagement, and all the consultation documents are available on our dedicated website, which is nestrans2040.org.uk. We've also set up a virtual exhibition to help guide people through the various documents. There's a presentation and a video on there as well, just to provide a bit more information. We've had some really good feedback on that, which has been really positive. prior to the launch on the 5th of August, we released an embargoed copy to a number of our key stakeholders. We also issued a press release as well, just to kind of get it out there to some of the people who may have been asked questions on it. So that was done the day before. It was officially launched on the 5th of August, where we sent out links to the website and all the documents via our consultative forum distribution list. All councillors, MPs, MSPs for the region all got it as well. In line with our statutory requirements, we've also had an advert in the Press and Journal regarding particularly the strategic environmental assessment, but advertising the consultation process as a whole. So during the course of this 10-week period, we're trying to engage with as many people as possible. We've had and are planning a number of events over the coming weeks. We had a council officers briefing at the beginning of September, just really to try and present the strategy, increase awareness of what was in the strategy amongst the officers who would be then contributing to various council responses. That was really well attended. We had over 50 council officers from both Aberdeen City and Aberdeen Shire come to that meeting, so it was a really good opportunity to go into a bit of detail on what's in the strategy. We're also holding a similar briefing session for local councillors and also MSPs and MPs on Friday this week. And tomorrow we've also got a virtual meeting of the North East Transport Consultative Forum, which is our forum of a really wide range of stakeholders are all invited to that. And these are all virtual meetings where we will present the strategy, we'll go through in a bit of detail what's in it and provide the opportunity for discussion and comment. And through all of these, we're also encouraging organisations to visit the website and to submit their responses. We've also done a workshop with Aberdeenshire Council Community Planning Forum. Again, a bit of a presentation and discussion on the strategy with community planning partners, and we've arranged a similar session with Aberdeen City Council Community Planning, Aberdeen City Community Planning Partnership as well. We've had quite a bit of media coverage so far, and that's covered in the information bulletin in Appendix 2 of item 8, which is on the agenda. And we've also had an article in the Chamber of Commerce Business Bulletin in September. So if you got that, you should have seen that. So yeah, we're halfway through that period just now. So far, we've had over 800 visits to the website, over 240 visits to the virtual exhibition. But as to date, in terms of formal responses, we're current as of last week, we're just sitting at 7 at the moment. I think obviously what we'll be focusing on over the coming few weeks is trying to convert those visits to the website and the exhibition into formal responses, and we'll be encouraging that through all the meetings that we've got going on over the next few weeks. And we're hopeful that as the period goes forward, we can encourage a number more responses, and we'll continue to support that through our social media tweets. We've had numbers of tweets going out reminding people of the process. The consultation period closes on the 16th of October, and the next steps, we're proposing to bring back a report of that consultation to the board in November, and then subject to discussion and agreement at the board, we would then look to finalise the strategy and bring back a final strategy in December. So then, if agreed, we are in a position to submit to ministers at the end of the calendar year. So the recommendation is really just to note the progress that's ongoing in terms of the public and stakeholder consultation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And can I ask members if they have any questions for Kirsty on the regional transport strategy? Bearing in mind that everyone has the opportunity to virtually dial in on Friday and get more information from that briefing. I'm not getting any questions at the moment, but it is something, of course, that's going to come back to the board in the fullness of time. So thank you very much for that, Kirsty. And board members, can we just agree the recommendation to note the progress of the RTS?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
If we could move on then to the Civitas Portus project update, and I think that's going to be Rab again.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5.1, as you say, is an update on the Civitas project. Members may be aware that the project was originally intended to complete its 4-year course at the end of August. However, due to the COVID situation, that has now been extended, although we are hoping locally to still complete most of the work within the next month or so. The final conference itself should have been in Aberdeen and was booked to be at the new exhibition centre, but obviously that has also been delayed. And we're now looking at a virtual final conference towards the end of September, so within the next week or two. I did want to bring to members a report just explaining that situation, but also to indicate that a couple of documents and productions that have been able to be funded through the project are available on our website. One on Park and Ride, which fed into the regional transport strategy at an appropriate time, as did one on travel planning. We've also looked at freight routing and have had a consideration around the whole question of freight routing. We've been able to appoint a freight advisor on a short-term contract, and that has helped with the Council's consideration of things like road hierarchies in and around Aberdeen and the wider area. We've also funded a number of adverts, particularly on the A96 corridor. There's an example of one included on page 120 of the report. Very much about keeping yourself safe whilst travelling. So encouraging people on public transport to use face masks, for example. We would intend to bring back a report on the project once it's complete. So at this stage, the report is really just for noting and to note the fact that the project has been extended over the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any questions, members? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Can you please remind me which work pack the Smart app was in that we're going to be developing?
Sorry, the Smart app, did you say, Councillor Bell? Yeah. It's one that we haven't been awfully involved in. Nestrans are only involved in, I think, 8 of the packages, and we're leading on the freight packages. So the Smart app isn't one that we've been directly involved in. I think it's probably work package 1 or 2 from memory.
Okay, thanks.
I think if I could bring in Mrs. Beattie.
Hello, just to confirm, yes, it is work package 2, and progress is still continuing on the Smart app.
Thanks very much for that. If there are no other questions, members, can we agree to note and to expect a future report on the project as it concludes?
Agreed.
Thanks. Just before I bring in, thank you. Just before I bring in the next report, I just wanted to say to members, you know, on behalf of all of you, Paul Finch and myself went along to the station the week following the passenger train derailment at Paramount near Stonehaven. So we also put forward a letter to ScotRail giving condolences to those who had perished in the accident, and also all those who had helped, and all the staff in the station and so on. So it's to let members know that. And of course, Aberdeenshire Council had the book of condolences that I'm sure many of us signed. So on that, you know, really somber note, because it really was a very moving and difficult time, and still is for obviously for many people. I'll bring in Paul Finch to take us through the rail update report as we know it at the moment. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you very much again, Chair. And there's 5 items on the report before you, and I think the first item has just been summed up very well there by Councillor MacDonald in terms of the situation at Carmont, the attendance at the minute silence, which again was very moving, and it was actually it was very appropriate to be there at that time to reflect on that and the wider links that Nestrans has with the wider rail industry. There's just some factual information there that we've been provided with by ScotRail, who are happy for us to share that with the board, just around site recovery, the restoration of passenger services, and I would note that a service is now running between Edinburgh and Montrose to supplement the service that's now running between Aberdeen and Stonehaven. Just a summary of the 4 different investigations, or 3 different investigations that are ongoing at the moment as well. Moving on from the derailment, I'd just like to spend a little bit of time talking about Aberdeen to Central Belt project. Members will recall that £200 million was announced for improvements between Aberdeen and Central Belt in January 26 by Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government, alongside the City Region Deal announcement. And the scope has been focused very much on reducing intercity journey times, enhancing commuter services, and increasing freight capacity. And in terms of those journey time improvements that are within the scope of this project, it's around 20 minutes to Edinburgh, 10 minutes to Glasgow, 5 minutes to Dundee. But they are average journey times, and that doesn't necessarily reflect the wide variety of journey times you can expect at the moment on the service. Now, progress on this project is reported 6 monthly to the Joint City Region Deal Board. And I would note that they've been applying significant pressure on Transport Scotland and Scottish ministers on progress, the details of the scheme, the anticipated benefits, and also questions around the funding arrangements again. And I think that they are due to be examined again in middle of November. A stakeholder group exists to report on this, comprising of Transport Scotland, Network Rail, ScotRail, Nestrans, and myself as the City Region Deal representative, and also TAPTRAN and Tay City's City Region Deal. And towards the end of July, the group received a presentation on the work, and I guess I wanted to highlight to the board some of the findings of the work that they've been doing. And also, just to flag up, at the moment, this is option feasibility work. There's still a while to go yet, but there are some key principles that have been set out. This is a GRIP 2 of 9 stages in their governance process. So I want to sort of convey that this is something that's not going to happen tomorrow, but it is within their network planning process for the next 5 to 10 years or thereabouts. The overall approach is to improve the capacity of the network by investing in signalling, passing loops, and removing key constraints, typically at stations. By improving the capacity of the network, they can then deliver faster city-to-city journey times and better local services. And that includes southbound services from the likes of Lawrencekirk, which are currently truncated at Montrose. Trying to get express services to arrive at the same time at interchange stations, so there's a better swap between the 2 different types of trains. Improvements to timetable performance, improved capacity for enabling Nestrans aspirations for new stations to be put in, improved freight opportunities on the line, and there's also implications here for hydrogen rail, if that means there is a requirement for a new base, if you have to have more train movements locally. The proposals they're setting out for Aberdeen Station could also have knock-on benefits for the aspirations that Nestrans and the region has for rail services north of Aberdeen as well, because that's a constraint. However, I have to highlight that there is a trade-off in terms of the work that's been presented to date around Stonehaven, whereas they would benefit from improved frequency of local services, both northbound and southbound. The proposals as presented does lose at least ScotRail intercity services because Stonehaven wouldn't be an interchange station for that, mainly on the local services. Whilst there might be practical considerations around the timetabling for this, the work does not necessarily then recognise the regional role of this station and the town, because Stonehaven rail station does serve that wider catchment for Deeside and Donside. The next stage of work is GRIP 3, and that's about costs and feasibility and the business case. So our recommendation on this aspect is to respond to TS with our observations, but also strongly making the point about the importance of Stonehaven to the regional rail network. I'll quickly move on to some of the other aspects in the rail report. Again, there is a local rail development fund study that Nestrans has looking at Lawrencekirk to Aberdeen multimodal. Early work is progressing well, and that does include early engagement on the rail side of things in terms of local stations, but also other measures on the corridor, perhaps park and ride and aspects along those lines. The work that Transport Scotland are doing and the work that we're doing at Nestrans has to nest together, so the two are complementary. Moving on, Transport Scotland have also recently published a decarbonisation plan. I think in a previous programme for government, they set out an aspiration for decarbonising the rail network by 2035. And they've come out with a plan. They say, well, actually, we want to electrify to Aberdeen and Inverurie by 2035, and Aberdeen to Inverness would follow after that. Now, locally, we have an aspiration for hydrogen and hydrogen rail, and we need to see how we can best fit those aspirations into these plans. Certainly, the local rail service between Montrose and Inverurie has a standalone fleet, and could be converted to hydrogen, and there's obviously the hydrogen hub plans around the ETZ, which the energy transition zone, which again could play a part in there. So I think we've got to keep on making the case around there. And lastly but not least, it's good to see that there's good progress at Kintor. After the COVID shutdown and restart, I think very much the construction activity is now complete, and they're very much into the commissioning side of things and working around planning of bringing the station into service. Also good to note that historic benches have been installed, and one of the former signal box signs I think is going to be put on the platform as well. So thank you very much for that quick run through, allowing me to make that quick run through, Chair, and I'm quite happy to take questions.
Thanks for that. And I've already got a hand up from Councillor Mollison. So if you'd like to come in, Councillor Mollison, and ask questions or make comment.
Thank you very much. Just get to the correct screen. Thank you, Paul, for your roundup. Most interesting. Fully support your hopes to raise the case for Stonehaven having some intercity services. As you say, it's more than just a station serving Stonehaven, but the wider area. One question I wanted to ask, in the summary about the derailment at Carmont, you rightly mention the rail service between Aberdeen and Stonehaven, calling at Portlethen. I was just wondering if you had any indication of passenger take-up. As the trains thunder past my house, I'm unable to tell, looking through the windows, how many people, if any, are on these trains. Buses I can see in the window, but not trains. And lastly, just a quick comment about the development into the future for better services to the northeast, especially as summarised in your bullet point, enabling additional local stations to be included in the future. Do you have an idea of how long that GRIP 3 analysis will take? Thank you.
Okay. I don't have specific patronage numbers for the newly introduced shuttle service. The only information I've got from ScotRail is that across the network, services are down to about 30%, but I would imagine in the northeast, and in particular the route between Stonehaven and Port Lethton, just because of the disruptions and perhaps the uncertainty that people might have about rail replacement and closures, I would imagine that it would actually be less than that at the current time, and perhaps people will take a bit of time to get the confidence back on that one. There was a question then about, sorry, I forgot. So that was the patronage then. Then we had the question about the Grip 3, the timing of the Grip 3 report. Transport Scotland, when they announced the funding at the same time as the City Region deal, committed to actually investing that 200 million within the same timescales of the City Region deal, which is a 10-year programme. So therefore, they would expect to be seeing expenditure on the network by in the next 5 years, 2026. So that is the commitment. I think that perhaps with Network Rail resources perhaps being diverted to some of the other issues on the network at the moment, we will have to watch closely and watch for an update on that, and we might get that update at the November joint committee for the City Region deal. So I don't have a timescale for that. I would expect that work would take at least 6 months to 12 months to sort out the feasibility and the costs and the business case. I think there was a third point, Councillor Mollison. I'm sorry, I didn't note that down.
The third point wasn't a question. It was just supporting your stance on getting more intercity trains to stop at Stonehaven. So
okay, thanks.
You captured the two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just wondered if Mr. Archer had anything to add, if he had anything to add on patronage on trains, or any update to give the board from an Aberdeenshire perspective at all.
Chair, a very quick answer. No, I don't. I don't have any further data.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thanks. Oops. Can we then agree to the 6 recommendations, members, on page 124?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes, great.
And then if we can move on to the progress report, as usual, I'm just going to invite members to bring up anything that they wish to on the progress report. It's there for us to ask questions on. So if you have anything particular that you'd like to draw to anybody's attention, if you could hand up now, that would be perfect. All happy with that? It is what it is. It's there for members to have a good rake through and to have a look at. And then on to 7.2. I think that's back to you, Brab, on the publications and consultations.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 7.2, publications and consultations. 4 or 5 that I wanted to bring to members' attention, although I think they're mostly for noting this time around. Paul has covered the decarbonisation of the railways in Scotland under the rail item 6.1. But as he said, I think a very significant one we've been looking forward to seeing, because we knew that Transport Scotland were giving consideration to the future long term of the railway network, and particularly how they could move towards zero carbon emissions through the railway, which always seemed very aspirational, but nevertheless of interest to us all. The second one is the Infrastructure Commission in Scotland's report, their second phase report. Again, very much based at the climate change and the reducing carbon agenda. So it's an item there for noting. Both Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City Council have produced local development plan proposed plans in the period since the last meeting, but both unfortunately had closing dates for comments before the meeting today. So we have submitted officers' comments on these contained at Appendix 1 in the case of the Aberdeenshire local plan, and within the text in the case of the city local development plan. And finally, there's an item for members' attention that Aberdeenshire have recently produced a roads policies review, and have included links to 3 elements of that in relation to speed limits, to crossings, and to street occupations. I think it's actually quite a detailed and technical consideration, which is really one for the council, but I wanted to bring it to members' attention in case there was any individual or personal responses that members wanted to make. I don't think there's really a need for formal engagement or response from Nestrans as an organisation. So that being the case, the recommendations are that the publications and consultations this time around are for members to note. I'm happy, however, to take any questions if necessary.
Councillor Bell, you have a question on this one.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just related to the speed limits and the 20 mph on minor roads. It's a good idea, I feel, but how would it be policed? I haven't actually looked at the 354 kilobyte report or the 1.3 megabyte manual, but do you know, Rab, how it would be proposed to actually ensure that people only drive at 20, or does it mean it slows them down from 50 to 30? I mean,
I don't know the exact answer to that or the straight answer to that, but I do know that they have in other council areas. I know Perth and Kinross, for example, and Clackmannanshire have what they have designated as greenways. So routes that are particularly relevant for walkers, cyclists and horse riders. And it's very much about signing to alert drivers that that is the case, that you should expect to see walkers, cyclists and horse riders on these routes. To be honest, many of them probably aren't suitable for a national speed limit of 60 miles per hour anyway. And certainly across Aberdeenshire, there are a number of lanes and routes which aren't really suitable for 60, but that currently have a national speed limit designation. So someone in my area, for example, going from Portlethen to Findon Village, it's a 60 mile per hour limit, but realistically, you could never ever do anything like that on the type of road, the narrow route with bends on it that it is. So I suspect it's more about education and alerting drivers to what they should expect on these routes.
Thanks for that. Ms. Buckle, you've got your hand up.
I might just be being stupid, but I can't see Appendix 1 to this report. I was, you wouldn't be surprised to hear I was particularly interested in what we were saying about the local development plans. And it could be staring me in the face, that's very possible, but I can't see Appendix 1.
I won't try and bluff my way through this one. Instead, I will make sure that Appendix 1 is circulated after the meeting, with apologies particularly to Maggie.
That's okay, thank you. I'm glad it wasn't me.
No, thanks very much. So board members, can we note as on page 170 these 4
agreed
reviews? Yeah, thank you very much. And on to the information bulletin. Rab again.
Thank you, Chair. The information bulletin, yeah, 3 things really that I would like to pull to or draw to members' attentions. Get about, we normally report under the information bulletin. And after a lull, a quiet time where it didn't seem appropriate to be encouraging people to use public transport and to car share, etc. We have now got back into the swing of things with post-COVID radio adverts, billboards and bus shelter ads, TV ads, and a focus on social media as well. There is examples given in Appendix A of the report, but we've slightly changed the focus. It's about keeping up with cycling and walking, where we know that people have started to engage more in that active travel element, and to get over the issue about face masks in particular in relation to public transport, and also physical distancing where appropriate. And you can see examples of some of the advertising at Appendix A. Also make mention of the behaviour and attitude surveys, which I think Paul covered under item 4.2, and the work that Sistra have been doing on our behalf with the regular monthly surveys. The third element is the press and communications, and members will see that it's been a really busy time in terms of press and comms, particularly around the regional transport strategy launch. And there is a list there at Appendix B of all of the media connections and coverage that there's been regarding Nestrans in the period since the last meeting. So the report's for noting, but again, happy to take any questions or members' comments.
Thanks very much for that. Any members wish to ask a question or make comment? If not, can we agree to note that report?
Agreed.
Thank you. And then on to our performance indicators, please.
Thanks, Chair. Performance indicators are really in three categories. One is about our business travel. One is about our travel to work as a group of staff. And the third one relates to our website and social media coverage. I should emphasize that these figures are pre-COVID, that relate to the year to March 2020. And obviously things are going to be very different for the coming year's indicators. In very brief summary, figure 1A on page 181 shows that our business mileage in the year to March, we were about 71% of mileage by public transport, mostly rail. Obviously members of staff tend to use trains where they can for business meetings. In terms of travel to work, I think we have a fairly positive split between active travel, both bus and walking, both cycling and walking. Public transport, both bus and rail, and about a third of our travel to work is by car. In terms of website, the Nestrans website to March had actually its highest ever year in terms of the number of hits on the website. And we also have fairly active Twitter and Facebook accounts, both for Nestrans and for Get About itself. So again, it's there for members noting. We do report this annually to the board for information.
Thanks very much for that. Any questions, members, about the performance indicators that we have in front of us? And nope. Then can we note that report? Oh, I've got Councillor Mollison.
Sorry, my fingers are not as fast as my intentions. Just a very minor point, but I would find it helpful. The graph 3C, most visited pages on Nestrans website. It's nicely split up, but unfortunately I can't tell easily which segment goes under which category. It would be helpful if it was described in a supplementary way, as is in addition to just colours. That was it.
Thanks very much. We'll note that for future annotation. I think that would be very helpful. Thanks very much.
Yep, thanks for that. You can certainly take that on for future reference. Thank you.
Agenda item 9. And I just see that Mr. Masson has emailed us the missing appendix, so that's great. Thank you. Agenda item 9, conferences and presentations. Just really for our reading of.
Thanks, Chair. Not really. We normally bring this to members' attention primarily to make members aware of what's going on, if they want feedback on conferences, or if there are any in the future that they feel that members of the board should be attending or should be requesting feedback on. I guess the report this time is just to let members know that a number of conferences and seminars have been taking place, but again, all have been virtual, so there's no expenditure involved. So it's really just for information.
Thanks very much for that. And then if we go on to agenda item 10 then, which is our own future business. Anything that you want to draw to our attention? The recommendation is to note.
Yeah, I think Kirsty already mentioned that the major reports coming back, of course, will be the draft regional transport strategy, report on consultation, which we intend to bring to the November board. And hopefully, depending on how that goes, that would give us the opportunity to report a finalised strategy to the December meeting. Other items there on reports which we're hoping to bring before the end of the calendar year.
I did I was just wondering whether it might be prudent to have a look thinking towards next year about who we might bring in to present to us, perhaps one of the areas, and we could maybe you know, think about that as a board and what we might want to focus on next year. And because you know how busy diaries get of people, so whether it's somebody from the airport or somebody from the rail or whatever, it's maybe something to think about going forward.
Thanks, Chair. We do have a standing item at item 2 on the agenda, which is presentations, but wasn't taken up for this meeting. But if you like, I could bring forward a report with suggestions, perhaps for the 6 meetings in 2021, of a range of speakers that we could maybe ask for a short presentation at the start of board meetings, if members felt that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm seeing nods around about that, because I think it is useful to go out and get feedback and information and knowledge in from others as well. So that would be very welcome. So that's us at the end of our agenda. And I don't know if anybody's got anything else, but can I thank you all for your attendance and for taking part. And we shall see you the next time, most likely in the same little boxes, but it will be, I think, a virtual meeting. So we shall see you all then. Take care, stay safe, and speak then.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.